Our whole process is oriented around going deep. The research is like the biggest part. I always say it's 70% of all of it. But when it comes for a website, for example, we look at heat maps, user recordings. When a user lands on this page, where it comes from, what do they do? What sections do they hover a bit more on? What do they scroll back and forth?
Welcome to Marketing by Design, where you and I learned from our favorite founders and marketers on how they built their success and told their stories by design. I am your host, Andy Milligan. Let's get started. Hello, what is happening, my friends, and welcome back to another powerful episode of Marketing by Design. This week, we have a super special episode with the one and only Chris Silvestri. You might have heard of Chris somewhere on LinkedIn. He goes by the Conversion Alchemist. He's built a very good brand around that title. I first came in touch with him, about a year ago via LinkedIn. I actually heard him on the Tropical MBA podcast. We talked about it a little bit before we started recording, but Chris was actually reached out to Dan and was featured in some of their DC Black events and helped them get their newsletter started. He came on an episode of their show. I heard him talk all about homepage messaging, and I thought he'd be a great guy to chat with. Chris is sort of this jack of all trades. He has no shortage of brand differentiation, kind of in his own personality. Huge, tall guy. He has a twin. He's jacked. He's traveling all around the world. He's got a great accent. He's got a ton of tattoos. But like I said, Chris is the founder of Conversion Alchemy. He specializes in website copy and strategy, all for B2B SaaS. And he's got a great body of work. Some of his clients include Moz and other well-known B2B SaaSes that you've seen somewhere online. And in this episode, we talk all about the intersection of design, which is what we do here, and copywriting. Chris has a background in UX. He has a background in software engineering. He's sort of this jack of all trades, like I mentioned. We built a really good rapport on this show. He talks a little bit about his story and how to do user research to write high converting website copy. He's not called the Conversion Alchemist for nothing. We're going to dive straight on into this episode. But before we do, I want to invite you guys to subscribe to the newsletter. 279 marketers and founders learn how to design a better website every single Sunday morning. And I would like you to be one of them. That'll be in the first link below. Be sure to check out Chris Conversion Alchemy, his great newsletter, which will be linked below as well. Without further ado, this is entry 124 of Marketing by Design. Let's get to it.
So Conversion Alchemy, it's we help B2B SaaS companies, typically Series A to C companies, or companies that already have product market fit. They're profitable, they're growing, but kind of hit a revenue plateau, or kind of they have a misalignment problem, and they still struggle to convey their value in a way that's differentiated, that stands out, especially with a lot of competitors popping up. And so we help them find this, what I call message market fit, and basically stand out in the marketplace and convert more visitors into prospects. So we usually work on strategy, so everything from positioning strategy, messaging strategy, and the actual copy at the end, mostly for website, so website copy, conversion copy, sales collaterals, or email sequences. Those are what we specialize in. And I call it Conversion Alchemy because actually the name came from, I don't know if you've read the book Alchemy by Rory Sutherland. He is kind of the chairman of Ogilvy UK, big advertising agency, and I was instantly hooked by how he thinks about advertising, the psychology behind the behavioral economics of all of it, and I tried to kind of form my idea of what that could be for B2B SaaS and conversion copy, especially in digital marketing copy. And I say that I combined a copy with the UX and the psychology. I combined a copy with the UX and the psychology. Then we have strategy, and then we have the final copies. Obviously, the research is like the biggest part. I always say it's 70% of all of it. And so everything comes from good research, and then everything else is pretty much, I wouldn't say done, but it comes it's a cascade from good research. So yeah, this is pretty much what we do at Conversion Alchemy and kind of how we think of it and how we approach it.
Yeah, and like I said, uh my especially my friend Tasbover, she always says that content is king, but design is queen. So kind of leading with that, and we'll talk more about. I think your background in UX colors a really interesting sort of texture to what it's like to work with you, and from all the stuff I've seen. Um, where does you kind of mentioned the research piece in the beginning and not informing the rest of the decisions. Where does UI, UX design, where does that become a piece in your conversation? Um, I think it's obviously very context dependent, right? So you work B2B SaaS. A lot of times it's more of, in my understanding, it's a lot more of a cleanliness problem. You want to be effective in your communication, and design is usually something that's minimal, on brand, and checking those boxes is something that's forefront because you want to portray the message that, especially if you're selling software, you want to get the sense that when people buy or they book a demo or whatever, when they get inside the tool, it's going to be easy to navigate and stuff like that. But I want you to sort of unpack where that not just fits in your process, but also maybe do a little delineation between UI, UX, design, where you draw that line, and how your experience plays a role in, your stance on it.
Yeah, so in my typical process, what we deliver, it's wireframes. And wireframes, for people who don't know what they are, it's basically considered like a skeleton of a web page, which basically it shows you how the copy should be laid out. Maybe you have placeholder for images, videos. You show where the buttons and the call to action should be on the page, and then a designer comes in, takes all of that, and turns it into mockups, and a developer turns those mockups into final design. So the UX that I work on, it's basically understanding, and that again comes from researching both the audience, the market, and internally with the team, but also the understanding what users do when they land on a website, for example, or even when they consume an email. Like, we try to go as deep as possible. But when it comes for a website, for example, we look at heat maps, user recordings. We try to understand, okay, when a user lands on this page, and also contextually where it comes from, what do they do? What sections do they hover a bit more on? How do they scroll back and forth? Maybe they don't understand something that's not clear. We need to clarify it. Do they do some rage clicking on the page, which means maybe they think it's something is clickable, and it's not clickable. So all of that informs the way that then we lay out the copy on those wireframes, and also the visual hierarchy, right? So once we have our messaging strategy in place, then how do we turn that into that structure that it should be represented on the website? So it's important to understand, okay, what messages should be seen first, what should be seen second, what messages we can make skimmable because they are still important, but we know that maybe users, when they land on it, then they don't go super deep into reading everything, but they need to just get the gist. And maybe those could be like short crossheads, some eyebrow copy, maybe to explain features, to name specific features that they care about. So that is the UX of copy. The UI, it's when a designer comes in, actually takes those wireframes and adds the branding, the colors, the fonts, images, videos, all of the kind of the aesthetic part. And anytime that I work with the designer, I always tell them, I don't care what you do with my sections. Like, feel free to be as creative as possible, make it as beautiful as you can, as long as the visual hierarchy, the messaging hierarchy of the copy stays the same, which means people should be able to read this paragraph or this headline first, then they should be able to naturally move to this next one, and so on, right? As long as that stays in place, everything's fine. So I mostly just provide them with ideas and variants, alternatives of sections that they could use or just reinterpret on their own. Yeah, so this is pretty much it. The copy, the UX, and the UI is that final
Yeah, I mean, you do a great job of kind of separating those two. And we talked to like I talked to Pierre last week, Anthony. You might have seen him on LinkedIn, but he does similar sort of positioning work. It's not nearly as in depth as what you guys do. Um, but that's kind of like the handoff. And like it always kind of fascinates me what we do because I used to work in an agency,
Mm,
and we were working from nothing. We would build landing pages for e-commerce and working from nothing but a Google Doc a lot of
mm,
times. And there's the visual communication piece where I mean, there's a lot of. I want to talk a little bit more, like in the weeds in terms of tool stack and stuff like that. Um, but there's a lot of communication the gap that's missed there when you're just referencing something that you're not kind of visually seeing
mm.
and coloring in that context. I think a lot of the clarity and what strategists and copywriters can do can get lost in that process when you're just reading it, and a lot of the context is
Yeah,
just not
yeah,
there.
totally.
But
And I would say like we started actually a step earlier than the wireframes because all our Google documents we still create the Google documents because it's easier for the designer to actually like copy paste the copy and maybe add
mhm,
comments if they need so. But all our
yes,
Google documents are also kind of pre-laid out in like using tables. So you look at the Google documents, but it basically almost looks like a wireframe already. And then we take those Google documents and kind of finalize them, polish them into an actual wireframe. So we might change maybe the design of a couple of sections from the tables that we have, but still the Google document already gives you a pretty good idea. And that's probably the step where we might already start working and collaborating with the designer on section ideas and layouts.
nice. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so I want to get nerdy a little bit. Let's talk about tool stack. What's tools in the conversion alchemy process? What tools specifically do you come back to? I see just kind of from a high level, watching some of your videos, listening to you on podcasts. I see the research part being the most dense.
Mm.
Probably one of the things that what you do a very good job of making it approachable. You don't weigh down with jargon, which is ironic because that's part of what you're trying to help other people not do. Um, but that's part of like the whole building a proprietary process. You've gone through the work of not just kind of recording it and really talking through on your own. Like that all lives in its own sort of place on YouTube. But I want to talk about tool stack, where that comes up in your process. You guys using like Hotjar, Userbrain, Clarity, sort of in the research phase, and which ones have you been most consistent with, you enjoy using the most?
Mm. Yeah, so totally. For the UX part specifically, I mean, for surveys, we might use Typeform, especially if the client already has it, or just simple Google Forms, or Hotjar. Hotjar is handy because if you're running, you can do a couple of things. You can do heat maps, user recordings, and they also have a website polls. So we use it a lot to run those website surveys where we ask a couple of simple questions to understand the audience, maybe awareness, or understand the ICP a bit better with real traffic. Obviously, that requires some traffic, so you might do that if you have some traffic. There also allows you to do surveys, whether it's just links to surveys that you send over via email or actual like pages you can have live on a website or embed surveys. So we also do surveys with Hotjar. And and we're saying yeah, so mostly Hotjar for those. I think that they also have some kind of testing, but I still have to try it. Like asking for feedback on sections of a website, I still have to try it though. But then the other testing that we do, it's usability testing. So I used to work at a usability testing startup. I did that for 2-3 years as a UX lead. So we used to watch a lot of usability tests, and that's
Nice.
when I actually understood the value of watching tests. And for the people who are in the know, these are unmoderated remote tests. So you basically watch recordings of people who kind of somehow fit your demographic use your website and tell you and go through different tasks and tell you what they think, where they find struggles or where they find frictions and so on. So I used to do a lot of those, and still I use it because I find the value, especially if we can find a similar demographic or we have our own audience to run through the tests. And a couple of platforms for those. I used to use Userfeel, which is a pretty good, convenient platform to use. Good if you want to export your reports and videos, because it allows you to do video snippets of the test results inside the platforms. So it's and also to share them. So it's pretty handy. Another one that I've used lately, it's been UX Tweak. If you send them an email, they're a very good service in helping you find the right audience demographic, even if you don't find it in their panel. They have this kind of it's basically included service, hands-on, and they can find your audience for you. So that's really good. And they have a lot of functionalities as far as usability testing, but also 5-second test. I've done tree testing once to test their navigation menu, the structure and the layout and some of the copy in it. So that's pretty good. It's a bit more on the advanced side. So if you're not a UX designer, it might be a bit complex at the start. So in that case, I would suggest either Uxfeel, or there's another one, which is the company where I used to work at. So they are a bit inactive yet, but they are doing more of a hands-on service right now. It's called Conversion Crimes. And they are pretty good if you are in B2C mostly, just because it's a bit harder for them to find like a B2B audience. But they are probably the cheapest one, and their testers are very good. And what I mean by testers are really good, even though like you wouldn't expect a usability tester to have to be prepared or anything. A lot of usability testers are not great at giving you feedback, and they have to be able to give you the right kind of feedback, right? If they go on a page and they tell you, oh, I don't like this, or they don't even speak throughout the whole test, it's kind of useless. So their testers are pre-vetted, pre-qualified, and they select them. So their feedback is really good, especially if you get like 15-20 minute tests. So there's a lot of good things that you can glean even from just 5 testers. So those are probably, the ones that I use for usability tests. And then Figma for designing, wireframing. I used to use Balsamic, but that's a bit more for maybe in-app, like product workflows, if I have to work on those. And mostly everything else is Google Workspace and lots of AI. We use all the tools if you want to go into that. But let me think. For research, what else? I would say it's pretty much it.
Yeah, that's a great little tool stack right there, and some of those I haven't heard so thank you. But have you ever, like, I remember the first time we started installing Clarity on our client sites probably about a year ago. Dude, like, I can waste so much. It's not wasted time, but I can spend so much time just watching user recordings, and it blew my mind just how I remember the first time, like, how often people actually rage quit. I didn't like how often, like, I didn't even really realize I did it myself. You're like, oh, it's not a rage quit, but it's like, it's a super subtle sort of thing. And we had the one interaction where it's a use case that comes to mind where, like, we had tooltips that weren't working, and we had people like clicking over and over on the pricing table. We're like, why are people clicking? And also, of course, FAQs get more clicks than anywhere on the entire site, right? So, and it's fascinating to see, like, wow, this is actually real, you know? It's like a supernatural feeling. And yeah, and like it doesn't inform as much on the design side, mostly on the messaging and copy side. You start to look at some dwell time, especially scrolled up is a big thing that we look at, especially that's more on the design side, but dwell time is a big one. So you can tell people are actually reading the copy, and you can kind of pattern match that page to page. But yeah, that's a bigger part, and I'm trying to lean more of that into our process internally, as well as including more of that in the front end, especially when we do a redesign. So what are the areas for improvement? What should we actually be spending time focusing on? And that's some of the biggest stuff I've learned from your content so far, man. So that was a little bit of a personal itch scratching right there, but I appreciate you going deep on the tools there. We kind of skipped right over this, but I want to talk about Chris, the founder, a little bit. You do have a personality as well. You've got the tattoos. You've got the company. I see you kayaking, doing all this cool stuff. Tell me about your founder story. Actually, you got a twin brother too.
Yeah.
Which is another cool thing. So tell me a little bit about you and how you got started, the career experience, and what led you to where you are now.
Yeah, sure. So I'm originally from Italy, north of Italy, Modena. And I always say I'm a recovering software engineer. I used to be a software engineer. And when I say software engineer, a lot of people think, oh, yeah, you are a developer, like a coder, websites. No, it's like completely different. I was a software engineer in industrial automation, which means think of like automatic assembly machines that like assemble plastic components. What I used to do is basically components that ended up in hospitals, so like plastic bags, connectors, all the stuff, and we built the machines that assembled all those components, so kind of like robots. And I used to program that logic. It's very much like logic-based programming. So you have a sensor that turns on a valve that like starts a movement and a sequence of movements and all that stuff. That actually taught me a lot about putting myself in other people's shoes and the UX side of things, because I also used to design their human-machine interface. It's kind of touchscreen displays that the operators use to control those machines. And but I actually realized that in hindsight, like years after. At the time, I kind of hated that job and did that for 10 years. I got kind of sick of it. At the same time, I'm also a drummer. Been playing drum for like 20, 25 years. We tried touring as much as possible with the band. We went to Russia, Europe, all over Italy. But the problem is always, you have to ask for time off like 3 months in advance, especially because with my job and the level that I got, I used to travel 5, 6 times a year for like a month at a time. And so it was kind of hard. And so I decided, why not look for how to make money online so that I can have something flexible and I can tour more with my band, right? So I started looking and did a couple of things. I did some content writing, blogs. With my brother, as you mentioned, twin brother, we launched an Amazon FBA business selling yoga straps from China. That kind of started, but didn't end up anywhere really. And after that, I stumbled on copywriting. I was instantly kind of hooked and fascinated by the psychology behind it, understanding how people think and kind of being able to, in a way, shape their decision, control what they did. So started looking first at direct response copy, like the old copywriters, did a couple of courses, started working on Upwork, did that for a couple of years on the side. And when I realized, okay, I made my first $1,000 online on the side and working weekends and evenings. Then I said, okay, I'm going to set my date to leave my job. At the same time, for a couple of different reasons, me, my brother, and his girlfriend at the time also decided to move to the UK. So when I left my job, I went full-time and also left Italy and basically everything behind. And when I went to the UK, that's when now I have more time, started looking around for communities. I joined this conference in Austin, attended this conference in Austin. And that's where I met the founder of the agency that I joined as a UX lead as well. So I did that for a couple of years, kind of expanded my world into UX, usability testing, still understanding even more how to put myself in other people's shoes. And after 2 years of that, I kind of realized, okay, I still liked being on my own. I'm still passionate about copywriting, probably a bit more than I was about UX. And so I went back on my own, 2021, I think. that's when I actually built Conversion Alchemy, my current brand agency. And so far, it's been going pretty well. I still want to be very lean. So for now, it's me, a junior copywriter, and an assistant mostly. And yes, this is pretty much how I got to this point.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. It's interesting to sort of color the context of where your frameworks and just where your perspective comes from. Like I said, you have the UI background, the UX background, but you also have the time as the software engineer. And it's interesting to like I think back to my childhood. Like I was always journaling. Like I was carrying around a journal, and we started sketching and and I realized that's where I kind of started making layouts. Like I would literally try and fill up as much of the page as I possibly could between writing and graphics. Um, and I think it's one of those things too where it's really resonated with me, where you don't really realize how that forms like the texture of your thoughts, like to how you're approaching the work until you like consciously like unpack and think, oh, maybe that's where these thoughts are coming from. So it's super interesting for me to hear that. So um, sort of landing the plane a little bit, man. One more question I did want to ask you is, it's sort of more current events, recent. How are you kind of currently keeping up with, we skimmed briefly over AI and stuff like that,
Mm,
but how are you staying on top of stuff like that? I know, especially very recently, we just had the Google I/O summit and stuff like that.
mm.
Um, is there anything that you are a good way I find to kind of phrase this question is there anything that you are that's informing your decisions internally, your client process, the way that you run the business, that you are aware of, but you don't yet have that you're currently acting on, but you don't yet have validation to prove?
Yeah,
Um, how are you
yeah,
sort of acting there?
yeah. It's a great question. So I'm like to keep up with stuff, especially AI, tech stuff. I would say a lot of it is on Twitter and X actually. I started actually like the first year since like ChatGPT 3 came out. I didn't really like do any courses. I was mostly just like trying stuff and following this guy. He's a professor, I don't remember where, called Ethan Malik, and he writes a lot of good insights and takeaways from actual research that he does, especially when it comes to he's into tutoring research, so like using AI to teach students and all that. I tried a lot of the stuff that he teaches to actually teach myself. So I still remember he had one of the first, when still like prompting, you needed to write kind of perfect prompts because otherwise the result was pretty much shit. So I still remember he had this kind of mega prompt that created, this was before GPTs were a thing. This prompt created like a real tutor to teach you stuff. So I tried all of that. I like learned through having AI teach me stuff, asking me questions, replying to the AI and all that, kind of having a conversation. And that informed a lot of the way that I actually use AI, which is basically having a conversation with an assistant from the kickoff, actually before the kickoff call of any project, like even at the proposal stage. I basically have a conversation with the AI that I keep and take forward till the end of the project. And the other thing, I have a podcast as well. So the podcast really helps. Kind of, I can ask basically questions to my potential clients on how they learn, how they keep up to things, what communities they hang out in, and also like seeing the themes and the topics that they are interested in, especially because a lot of these guys have an audience already, maybe on LinkedIn, so they know they have the pulse on the situation. So all of that kind of
Yeah.
informs, I think, the way that I think about things and how like what priority I should give to certain topics or certain emerging technologies, I would say. And probably the other ones is LinkedIn as well, seeing just a couple of people that I follow on LinkedIn and listening to podcasts and books. I read a lot of books, probably like one book a week. Sometimes it's not related to
Nice.
marketing or digital at all.
Yeah.
It's mostly just about life and philosophy, psychology. But yeah, those are pretty much my sources.
Yeah,
What about you?
that's awesome. Yeah, I can tell like it's always interesting to know, like I said, the inputs, you know. So that's really top of mind. And the last thing I would do want to ask you is, like I said, a lot of the audience is they kind of teeter between the in-house versus the agency route in terms of starting their own thing in marketing. Um, Especially with you, how important is it to you to have your own framework, your own process, your own takes, and then really making, not just informing that in a content strategy in terms of how you market yourself, but and just iterating upon it and using that to inform, like, okay, this is the process of working with me from start to finish. How
Mhm.
important has that been for you in Conversion Alchemy? And is that something that you would recommend, creating your own proprietary process around whatever niche it is that you're in
Mhm.
and using that to deliver the outcome and kind of separating the client relationship from just working with me versus this is the process of
Yeah.
how we get you to what you want.
Yeah, yeah. So I would say that's a very interesting question because I think it applies to both in-house people at a company and also consultants like us, right? I think for
Interesting.
in-house people, especially if you're the founder and you're working on messaging, having your point of view, your like specific and differentiated insight, that's where actually the whole messaging strategy and your narrative starts from. So if even if you have, I don't know, a product that's pretty unique that like the competition could claim anything and maybe your messaging wouldn't even stand out, but if you weave your point of view into that messaging and tell people like you have this problem, we are kind of observing this problem and this is how you solve it through our product, that's already like a head start over the competition. So having your point of view, I think it's super valuable. Even if you're a marketer, you're not the founder, having your point of view as kind of an influencer on even on LinkedIn could be super valuable. As a consultant, I actually want to shout out to Jay Akanzo. I learned a lot from him. He used to have a community called Creator Kitchen. Now I think is mostly around. He does workshops on public speaking. Is an amazing public speaker. But he like from him, I learned the idea of having your premise, and by premise, basically he means the kind of the like the colored glasses that inform everything that you put out. So having your kind of like this main idea or a couple of I don't know, 2, 3 core ideas that inform everything that you put out, whether it's your newsletter, your LinkedIn post, your podcast, everything that you put out stems from that core premise. So for me, it's the combination of like copy, UX, psychology, and also the idea that like starting with the name Conversion Alchemy, that words alone are just the base metal. It's the combination of copy, UX, and psychology that turns them into gold, converts them, right? So that's kind of my premise. And from that, I have a couple of different sub premises. So I think it's important to see the way that you think, the way that you put out content in a way that kind of gives you a bit more authority if you can frame it through this premise lens, because otherwise you're basically just talking and like sharing stuff that everyone is already saying, especially now with AI. You can have something to GPT. Yeah, it's going to be good informational content scraped from the internet, but everyone can do that, right? So if you have your
Mhm.
kind of own unique positioning and premise, then that's probably helpful in differentiating you.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. It's always helpful to have a filter, like a thing to reference to, because you can create so much, right? It's the metric of success really shifts to more, is this accomplishing our goals rather than is it just showing up in general.
Mhm.
And that's one of the biggest things that I've taken away just, from being in your ecosystem, is that you have X process that delivers Y result, and the path to get there is what I'm taking you along and kind of holding your hand along through the journey of. That's very top of mind for me, and it's just it's a lot of those same questions that we get, from the members that attend our events and the people that we're trying to help as well. But But man, like kind of landing the plane here. That we very appreciative of your time, man. Like, and everything that I've seen from you, Conversion Alchemy, all the content I've consumed, I see nothing but up and to the right. You know your stuff. You know the process. You're very well spoken. So you come across very well on all the platforms. Highly encourage people to go check out your YouTube channel to go know what it's like to really go down the rabbit hole and say, okay, this is what we're looking at, and kind of look through those rose-colored glasses of Chris himself. I think for this audience, as well, you show up in a lot of places. I think for this audience, the message market fit scorecard would be a great sort of resource. Just kind of know how they're coming off, like how are we showing up on different platforms, and is our message aligned with where we're showing up? So, is there anywhere else people can go and find you and become a fanboy like myself?
Also, thank you so much. That was a pretty good overview. Yeah, so the scorecard, I'm actually still kind of working on it, so it's kind of like an MVP. But for the first like 50 or so people, I'm following up personally with like recommendations. So if people can get on it, I'm super interested in general about learning about the current state of things from different people if they fill it out. And the other thing, maybe like my newsletter, I have a newsletter on conversionalchemy.net that you can find pretty easily. And there I write once a week about mostly my premise. So all topics that I'm interested in, research, messaging strategy, copy, persuasion, decision making, all of that.